All right, guys, welcome back. So in this video, I want to go over my lifestyle friendly approach to fat loss, right? And more specifically, how to actually make hitting the right amount of calories easier so you can be more consistent with it long term, right? So let's get into it. So first things first, just want to go over why people fail to reach their fitness goals, right? Especially, for fat loss. This is usually a common issue. Why is everybody struggling to get lean, right? It's 2024. You would think all the information should be out there and it should be easy. But if you look around, we're the most overweight we've ever been, especially in the United States. So really two reasons that are holding people back from their goal, right? First is tracking. A lot of people don't know how many calories that they're consuming. You could ask someone, how many calories do you eat a day? And they have no idea because they haven't learned about how many calories are in certain foods, right? That's the first one, understanding how many calories you're actually eating. Second is people might think they know, right? If you ask someone, oh, I'm eating 2,000 calories and not losing weight, but then they actually, track that food and see how accurate that actually is. And they realize they're actually eating 2,500, 3,000 calories, right? So it's very easy to underestimate how much you're eating. When in reality, if you actually track it, most people are probably eating a lot more than they think, right? And both of those is going to lead to slower progress or even no progress. So that's the first one, tracking. Second is adherence. So let's say you do know how many calories to hit and you know how to, keep track of that. Next thing is actually sticking to it, right? This is where most people screw up because you might have less calories than you're used to consuming and you have a hard time hitting that number because oftentimes you're going to, get hungry at night. You're going to have cravings and it's easier to go over that number, right? So that's kind of the first problem. And then the second is also very common. This is actually problem that I had in the past. Let's say you eat well, you hit the calories Sunday through Thursday, but then like a Friday or a Saturday, you screw up and go way over the calories, right? And that's going to set you back from all the progress you made during the week. And it's very easy when you're restricting yourself all week. And let's say Friday you overeat. A lot of people kind of have the all or nothing mentality where it's like, oh, I screwed up, might as well just eat whatever now, right? Just throw all discipline out the window. That's kind of what causes like the binge eating that I actually went through this myself too, where it's you screw up and you're like, oh man, I screwed up. Might as well just keep screwing up and worry about it tomorrow, right? I'll do all the cardio tomorrow. So tracking and adherence are really the two things we're focusing on here. So first things first, just want to go over how to actually approach tracking correctly. And really the first focus is you want to know how many calories you should be consuming for your goal, right? That's really the first step. How much should you actually be consuming? And this is really just comes to energy balance, right? Physics. Every day, based on how much you weigh, how active you are, you're going to burn a certain amount of calories that day, right? You're also going to take in a certain amount of calories from food. So how weight loss, weight gain, right? Weight management, how that is taken into account is if you are burning more calories than you're taking in, right? Burning more calories than you're taking in, you'll be in a calorie deficit. And this is what triggers weight loss, right? If you're burning more than you're taking in, essentially your body realizes, hey, we are not getting enough energy through food. We need this energy from something. So it's going to take that from your energy stores in your body, which oftentimes is fat, sometimes can be muscle, but there's ways to prevent that. So that is what a calorie deficit is. And that is how weight loss is triggered. Second, let's say you burned the same amount of calories as you consumed. In that case, you're at your maintenance, which means, there's no incentive to lose weight and there's also no incentive to gain weight. So you're likely going to stay around the same weight. And then third, if you are consuming more than you burn, right? So you're consuming more through food, that is a calorie surplus. And that's what causes weight gain because your body essentially realizes, all right, we have all this extra energy. Let's save this for later in case we have a shortage of food. Because if you don't have energy reserves, then you're not going to last very long. So with that in mind, there's really 3 steps to solving tracking, right? First is just setting the right target calories. Second, learning how to track correctly using a tracking app. I personally like MyFitnessPal because it's very user-friendly. And then third, once you learn, how to track correctly, how many calories are in certain foods, your goal should be to transition into intuitive eating where you can just kind of ballpark and use your good eating habits to maintain your progress. So step 1, right? How do you find your target calories? How much calories should you be consuming? For most people, I think you can just start with an estimation. Like you can't really know for sure how many calories you're burning. Every day is going to be different, but I like to start with just an estimation that's most likely it's relatively close to what you're actually burning. So if you look here, right, if you're a lightly active person, which means, you probably have a desk job or you're not very active, probably get less than 5,000 steps a day. If you multiply your body weight times 14, that should be a relatively similar calorie target to what you're consuming. If you're moderately active, which means, you might go to the gym a couple of times a week, maybe you're getting, 5,000 steps or so per day. Then in that case, if you multiply your body weight times 15, that should give you a better target calories. And then let's say you're active, you're getting 10K steps a day. You go to the gym, moving around a lot. Then, body weight times 16 is probably more close to what you're burning. Like I said, this is not going to be 100% correct. I think what you should do is kind of use this as a reference, start at that number, and then based on how you react, how the scale is moving. If you're making progress, you can always adjust by adding or subtracting. But, it's a good, for most people, it's a relatively good way to kind of get a general ballpark of how many you're burning. So estimate your calorie maintenance, right? Second, from there, you need to figure out what is your goal. So if you're trying to lose fat or are you trying to build lean muscle, right? For fat loss, especially sustainable fat loss, I like to start with a 300 to 500 calorie deficit. There's no point in pushing it more than this. It's not sustainable. You want to start off gradual, and you can always lower as you go on, essentially taking your maintenance and subtracting 300 to 500 from it. If you're trying to focus more on lean muscle growth, I would say just adding 100 to 300 calories to that number. There's really no benefit to adding all these extra calories, as a lot of that is going to turn to fat. From experience, 200 to 300 calories is really all the extra calories you need to maximize your progress, have energy in the gym. So I personally think it's good to start relatively small like that. And like I said, you can always adjust things if you're hitting a plateau. So just for an example here, right? If we're taking 180-pound person who's moderately active, you would multiply 180 times 15 to get a calorie maintenance of 2,700. And if this person was trying to lose fat, I would probably recommend starting at around 2,400, seeing if that affects the scale, if they start to see progress. And if the progress slows down, you could always subtract from there or increase activity. But that's kind of just what a goal would be for where to start out. And then if you're lean bulking, adding about 200 to that and going for 2,900 calories is another good target. So that's kind of an example of what I would focus on and how much calories to consume. So now that you know how many calories to consume, the next step is, how do we actually keep track of these, right? How do you track your calories? And the most user-friendly way to do this is through a tracking app. I think MyFitnessPal is definitely one of the best ones out there. I recommend you guys starting out with this. And pretty much what you do is you download the app. The first thing you do when the app downloads is you go into the More section on the bottom right, and you go into your goals and you change your nutrition goals to add in your calorie target, right? So it's going to essentially ask you, how many calories are you trying to burn? If you're shooting for 2,400, you'd write that in. And then it would also ask you for your macronutrient percentages. And your macronutrients are essentially your carbs, your fat, and your protein. They're the three things that make up your calories. So really, the thing here is, what percentage of your calories are going to come from protein, fat, and carbs? And for most people, I recommend, 20 to 25% protein is a good reference point. 30 to 40% carbs is great. And then 25 to 35% fat. I personally like to go more of the higher fat, lower carb approach, although it really is preference. But for protein, I definitely go no less than 20%. So those are just my recommendations for most people on what I would do for the percentages. But the most important part is really just the calorie number. So that is how to set that up. And then the last thing is, it makes a lot of sense to get a food scale. You can get one for like $10, $15 on Amazon, just because it's the easiest way to track food. You don't have to measure anything out with a measuring cup or anything like that. You just literally take a bowl, put the bowl on the scale, and then you just put whatever food into the bowl, and it will track all of the grams, the ounces, whatever the metric is for you. So definitely get a food scale. And then one last point here, there is a feature where you can save certain meals into the app. So, what I recommend doing is figuring out some good meals that are within a calorie range that you like, save them into the app, right? You just, put the name of the meal, you put the ingredients, the foods you used, so that the next time you have that meal, instead of going in and tracking everything all over again, you just hit the meal and it automatically logs all the food in that meal. So that's a super helpful strategy to have. I call it meal rotation or meal cycling, because essentially you can get to a point where you have just a bunch of meals saved and you just kind of cycle between those meals, right? You got your, 2 or 3 breakfasts, your 2 or 3 lunches, your 2 or 3 dinners, and you just kind of cycle between those, and tracking gets very easy from there. So that's kind of how to track things with MyFitnessPal. And if you check out my YouTube channel, I have a video showing you exactly how to use the whole app. I also have a second video going over more advanced strategies. So look for those MyFitnessPal videos at my YouTube channel. And then step 3 is really just where to go from here, right? So once you learn how to track calories, the meals that you like, how many calories are in those meals, then you can graduate to not using the app anymore and just really ballparking calories, right? Really, the goal with MyFitnessPal is to improve your nutritional awareness and help you build good eating habits, so that once you get comfortable with it, you can just maintain those habits, prioritize the foods you're familiar with. At that point, you can just use the app when when necessary, right? If you, let's say you buy some sort of food you've never had before, you could always use the app just to see how much calories are in that, but you don't necessarily have to track everything you eat for the rest of your life. That's insanity. So really, it's just about learning about calories, building better habits, and as you go on, you could always look certain foods up to help with that. But yeah, really the goal is just how to get better at intuitive eating. All right, so that's pretty much how to solve tracking, right? 3 steps. And once you kind of figure that out and you know how to actually hit the right amount of calories, then it comes to actually adhering to it, right? So we're going to go over adherence in this slide. So really the approach you want to have is the daily budget mindset, right? If you, let's say we're using 2,500 calories, right, as your target, how you want to approach that is you have 2,500 calories to spend, right? It's calories, not money, but you have 2,500 calories to spend. That is your budget. Your goal is to figure out how you can best spend those calories in the most enjoyable way without going overdrawn, right? If you go over that number, you're overdrawn. In nutrition standpoint, it means you're in a surplus or you're not in the deficit, right? So we want to figure out how can we hit that number in a way that's you enjoy it and you don't feel restricted and you can actually do that long term, right? So that's really the goal we're going for, the bank analogy. So from there, the approach I like to use is called flexible dieting, right? More specifically, the 80-20 rule. What this rule means is you should try to get 80% of those calories from nutrient dense foods. And then if you do that, you can fit in 20% of those calories from the favorite foods you're craving or the not so healthy foods, right? It's all about sustainability. If you're eating 80% of your calories from good quality foods and you're hitting your calories, then you will still see results and you can fit in 20% of really whatever you want. So some examples of the 80% foods would be, lean meats, fish, eggs, Greek yogurt. Those would be kind of more of the protein sources. For carbs, fruits, some vegetables, rice, potatoes, and then for fats, things like butter, olive oil, coconut oil, cheese, avocado, right? The foods that have a lot of nutrition in them. And then the 20% foods would be things like, chocolate, cookies, ice cream, right? Foods that don't have a lot of nutritional value. They're more of like empty calories. But I think it's good to kind of have a balance of both, because if you're eating 100% clean, healthy foods, you might be able to do it for a little bit, but at a certain point, you might have, a birthday or an event where you have temptations in front of you. And if you are 100% cold turkey, it can be hard, it drains your willpower a lot to fully restrict those foods. So I think it's good to have some of them in your diet. The only thing you want to focus on here is you don't want to have ultra processed foods as your 20% foods, right? If you're going to have cookies, don't get some super processed cookies with a bunch of seed oils and preservatives. Get something like either, homemade from a bakery or, Tate's cookies have good ingredients in it. Siet cookies or whatever I pronounce that is a good brand. So something like that, right? You want to stay away from all the processed garbage and the seed oils. But yeah, if you can find a good quality 20% food, organic chocolate versus like Hershey's, right? That's kind of where you want to be with that. And that brings me to the third point, which is factoring in food volume and satiation, right? Really the premise here is that calories are calories, but not all food you respond to the same way. So for example, right? Let's say you have 300 calories left on your day to hit your goal. And you have the option of eating some potato, like a baked potato, or eating ice cream, right? Either one, right? It doesn't matter which one you pick. As long as you eat 300 calories of it and you hit your goal, you will stay on target. However, 300 calories of potato is a lot more filling and satiating than 300 calories of ice cream, right? You eat the potato, you're going to feel relatively full. You're going to have an easy time sticking to the calorie number. If you have the ice cream, chances are you're not going to be as full and the sugar is going to give you more cravings. So you're going to want to go over that calorie number, right? So really just take into consideration what foods make you feel full and satiated so that you don't screw up and overeat, right? I'm not saying you can't finish the day with 300 calories of ice cream. You just need to figure out like, hey, if I'm going to do that, I need to be eating more satiating foods as my 80% foods so that I can fit in the non-satiating foods and still be fine, right? If you're eating only foods that aren't filling and satiating and giving you cravings, then you're going to just blow over your calories way easier. So that's what I would just consider. How do you respond to these foods so that you can actually hit the calorie number? And then the last point here is meal frequency, right? How many times per day are you going to eat? How many meals to make up that calorie number? And with this, it doesn't matter, if you're eating 6 small meals or 1 massive meal, as long as your calories add up at the end of the day, right? So for this example, I personally like to have bigger meals when I'm trying to lose weight. I don't like having smaller meals because then you kind of feel restrictive. And especially, on weekends, maybe you go to dinner and people are having like a nice bigger dinner, right? The last thing you want to do is have dinner roll around and you already consumed most of your calories for the day so that you feel restrictive and you're like, oh, I don't have much calories left. I'll just get the chicken and rice or the chicken and broccoli or something like that. So that's not really where you want to be. And for this reason, I personally like doing intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting is essentially just not consuming calories until later in the day. So for example, today I woke up, I have my coffee here, I drink some water, and I'm probably not going to eat until around 12 or 1 p.m. At that point, I'll have my first meal. And for my first meal, my goal is really just to knock out some protein, get some good nutrition in for a moderate amount of calories, right? I'm not trying to spend a ton of calories, but 600 to 800 max, just to kind of get me going so I feel good. And then from there, I might have a snack, some fruit or a protein bar. And then I have most of my calories to use for dinner. And when you kind of approach it like this, it's just way more enjoyable because you can just have big dinners every single day and still get lean. So I'm definitely recommend intermittent fasting. Or, if you like having bigger breakfasts, that's fine too. You just need to figure out what works better for you and what part of the day you should have most of your calories in, and also what part of the day you should not be having most of your calories in. So meal frequency, essentially, it's based on how many calories you're consuming, based on the foods you're consuming, what part of the day makes the most sense for you to consume those foods. And, for me, I recommend the fasting just because it's more of a lifestyle friendly approach, because most of the time people aren't really going out for bigger breakfasts. It's more bigger dinners, right? I like the flexibility of, saving some calories up. So if I'm gonna rip a big dinner on the fly, or if I get invited to do something, I can have those calories and I can feel guilt free and hit those numbers relatively easy. So that is meal frequency. And with that, that's pretty much the whole video, guys. Tracking, adherence. If you can just figure out how to solve these two things, you can get to your goal very easily, right? It's all about hitting the right amount of calories. Tracking, figuring out how many calories you're actually consuming, how to actually keep track of those, and then adherence, how to actually stick to that long term. And if you follow these strategies, you use this mindset, you will have a lot of success getting to your goal. So thank you for watching the video. If you found this helpful, give it a like, share it with a friend, and see you guys in the next one.